Amid the ceaseless rhythm of a vibrant city where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and the glow of streetlights danced on rain-slick pavement, Sophia had forged a life that radiated resilience. A transgender woman of 33, she had weathered storms of societal rejection and personal struggle, emerging as a beacon of strength and authenticity. Her loft apartment, high above the urban sprawl, was a testament to her spirit. Walls adorned with abstract paintings, shelves heavy with novels and journals, and windows that framed the city's endless pulse. As a freelance illustrator, her designs were sought after for their daring creativity, and her tight-knit group of friends cherished her for her empathy and unyielding courage. After years of fighting to be seen, Sophia finally felt at home in her own skin. It was a chilly October morning when fate intervened. In a bustling cafe where the scent of roasted coffee beans mingled with the murmur of conversation, Sophia reached for a misplaced mug on the counter. Her hand brushed against another's, a man with warm hazel eyes and a smile that seemed to unravel the chaos of the world. His name was Ethan, and what began as a fleeting moment of connection sparked something profound. Ethan, 36, was a public relations strategist with a knack for weaving stories that captivated. Their exchange flowed effortlessly, from shared passions for art and travel to the small quirks that made them human. By the time they parted, numbers exchanged, Sophia felt a spark of possibility she hadn't known she was searching for. Their romance unfolded like a melody, each note building on the last. Late-night texts evolved into sunrise hikes, weekend escapes to quaint mountain villages, and quiet evenings spent tangled in conversation on Sophia's balcony. Ethan saw her, not just the woman she was, but the journey she had traveled. He listened to her stories of pain and triumph, never shying away from the realities of her life as a transgender woman. "You're a force," he'd say, his voice steady with admiration, and Sophia felt her heart open in ways she hadn't thought possible. For the first time, she dared to dream of a love that could weather any storm. Yet beneath the warmth of their connection, a shadow loomed. Ethan hailed from a rural town steeped in tradition, where conservative values and rigid expectations defined his upbringing. His parents, devout and unyielding, held fast to a worldview that left little room for deviation. When Ethan brought Sophia to meet them at a strained Sunday brunch, the air crackled with tension. His mother's greetings were clipped, her eyes avoiding Sophia's. His father's questions were probing, laced with a subtle judgment that stung. Ethan's old friends, too, offered only polite smiles, their discomfort palpable. But Ethan stood firm, his hand finding hers beneath the table. "They don't matter," he whispered later, his voice fierce. "We do." Sophia held on to his words, trusting in the man who made her feel invincible. Their wedding was a vision of enchantment, a defiant celebration of their love. They chose a remote coastal cove, where waves crashed against cliffs and the sky burned with the colors of dusk. Sophia, radiant in a gown that flowed like liquid starlight, walked barefoot on the sand. Ethan, dashing in a linen suit, gazed at her with eyes that seemed to hold a universe. Beneath a canopy of wildflowers, they exchanged vows that wove promises of devotion and resilience. Friends and a handful of allies cheered as they sealed their bond with a kiss, the ocean's roar a symphony behind them. For Sophia, it was a moment of pure triumph, a declaration that she belonged, that her love was enough. She believed this was the dawn of a shared forever. But love, no matter how fierce, cannot always silence the doubts that fester in silence. Deep within Ethan, a turmoil stirred. a conflict he barely recognized, let alone confronted. As their wedding neared, subtle signs of strain emerged. His replies grew terse, his presence distant. During quiet moments, his eyes would wander, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. Sophia, attuned to his shifts, chalked it up to the stress of planning. Ethan had always been her anchor, shielding her from the world's cruelty. He had promised her everything, and she trusted him wholly. Yet beneath his polished exterior, Ethan was fraying. One night, at a cozy trattoria with ivy-covered walls and flickering lanterns, Sophia reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, revealing a tightness in his expression. "You're so quiet," she said gently, searching for the warmth she craved. Ethan paused, then offered a strained smile. "Just worn out," he said, but his hand twitched beneath hers, a silent betrayal of his unrest. In truth, his mind was a tempest. He loved Sophia, or so he told himself. But with every glance, a cacophony of doubts roared to life. His childhood teachings, with their strict definitions of love and identity, gnawed at him. The disapproval of his family, the whispered judgments of friends, the weight of societal expectations. They pressed against him, unrelenting. The eve of their wedding found Ethan alone in his hotel suite, staring into a mirror that reflected a man he didn't recognize. His eyes were shadowed, his jaw tight. "You love her," he murmured, his voice trembling as he gripped the sink. He repeated the words, desperate to believe them, but the doubts only grew louder. The next day, as he stood before Sophia and spoke his vows, his heart was a battlefield of love and fear, laying the foundation for a tragedy neither could anticipate. Their honeymoon was a vision of paradise, a private island resort where emerald waters kissed white sands and palm fronds swayed in the breeze. Their suite was a haven of opulence. Vast windows framed the ocean's expanse. A canopied bed was swathed in silk, and a private pool shimmered under the stars. For the first few days, it was perfection. Sophia and Ethan savored candlelit dinners, their plates adorned with exotic fruits and delicate seafood. They wandered the beach hand in hand, their laughter mingling with the waves. Beneath a crescent moon, they stole kisses that felt like vows renewed. To any onlooker, they were the embodiment of bliss, a couple stepping into a lifetime of love. But beneath the surface, Ethan was drifting. His smiles grew mechanical, his joy hollow. He watched Sophia with a tangled mix of awe and unease, her strength a mirror to his own faltering resolve. Every touch, every shared glance, stirred a storm of guilt and confusion. He should have been content. This was the life he had chosen. Yet the voices in his mind grew louder, unyielding. One evening, as they reclined on their terrace, the sky a tapestry of stars, Sophia nestled against him, her breath warm against his chest. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and hibiscus. "This is my dream come true," she murmured, her voice soft with peace. Ethan's arm tightened around her, but his heart was heavy with dread. He longed to share her serenity, but a darkness was taking root, one he couldn't name. Sophia began to sense the shift. The man who once held her with fervor now seemed to shrink from her touch. His kisses were fleeting, his words sharp. His gaze, once warm with love, now seemed to pass through her. She told herself it was fatigue. The wedding had been intense, the journey long. But as the days wore on, his detachment grew undeniable. One morning, as they sat on the terrace with a spread of tropical fruits and steaming coffee, Sophia could no longer ignore the rift. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with worry. Ethan's hand trembled as he held his mug, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I'm fine," he said, his tone clipped. "Just tired." But the lie hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Sophia saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided her gaze. Something was amiss, and he wouldn't let her in. That night, she awoke to an empty bed. The sheets were cool, and a pang of fear gripped her. Slipping from the covers, she stepped onto the terrace, where moonlight bathed the tiles in silver. Ethan stood at the edge, his silhouette rigid against the churning waves. His hands gripped the railing, knuckles white. "Ethan," she called softly, hugging herself against the night's chill. He didn't turn. "Go back to bed, Sophia," he said, his voice cold, distant. Fear coiled in her chest, mingling with the love she still held. She stepped closer, desperate to bridge the gap, but the chasm between them felt vast. The tension had been simmering, a spark waiting to ignite. That night, it erupted. They had just returned from dinner at the resort's oceanfront bistro, where the air was alive with the scent of grilled fish and the hum of live music. Ethan had been erratic all evening, charming one moment, withdrawn the next, his eyes dark with unspoken thoughts. Back in their suite, the silence was oppressive. Sophia could bear it no longer. "What's happening to you?" she demanded, her voice sharp with frustration. "You're shutting me out." Ethan paced, his hands tugging at his hair. "I don't know, Sophia," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." Her heart sank. "Doing what? Being married to me?" The words were a wound, tearing at the life they'd built. Ethan faced her, his eyes wild with anguish. "I thought I could handle it," he said, his gesture vague but cutting. "I thought I could accept everything." The words struck like a blade. Sophia's breath hitched. "You knew who I was," she said, her voice trembling with betrayal. "You said it didn't matter." "I thought it didn't," he roared, his voice raw with pain. "But it does." Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks as the truth shattered her. "So you regret it all?" Ethan's silence was a crushing answer. Fury surged within her, hot and fierce. "You married me, Ethan. You promised me forever." His fists clenched, his body shaking. "I was fooling myself," he whispered, the words barely audible. "I can't change what I feel." The room seemed to collapse, the air thick with their unraveling. Ethan turned away, gripping the balcony railing as if it could anchor him. His body trembled, caught in a war within. Then in a moment of devastating clarity, he whirled around. Before Sophia could react, his hands were on her, his face a mask of tears and rage. The last thing she saw was the man she loved, his eyes tormented, before the world faded to black. The wind screamed outside, the ocean's waves a relentless assault on the shore. Inside the suite, a chilling silence reigned. Sophia's body lay still on the marble floor, a dark bruise encircling her neck. Her eyes, once bright with hope, were lifeless. Ethan stood over her, his breath ragged, his hands shaking as he stepped back. Her final desperate gasp echoed in his mind, her fingers clawing at him in vain. In his fury, he hadn't stopped until it was too late. His thoughts were a whirlwind of panic and regret. He hadn't meant for this, hadn't planned it. But when she challenged him, when her voice rose, something inside him broke. Now staring at her still form, the weight of his actions crushed him. "No, no, no," he whispered, his voice fracturing. His legs gave way and he sank beside her, the reality of his crime suffocating. Memories of their love, their laughter, their promises flooded him, now stained by this horror. He had destroyed it all. Panic clawed at him. He couldn't stay, couldn't be found like this. With shaking hands, he draped a blanket over Sophia's body, his breath uneven. "I'm sorry," he murmured, the words empty against his sin, but no words could undo it. His mind raced for a way out. If her body was discovered, he was finished. The clock read 3 a.m. The resort was quiet, its guests asleep in their lavish suites, oblivious to the tragedy within. Ethan acted swiftly, driven by desperation. He stripped the bed, bundling sweat-soaked linens into a trash bag. He scrubbed every surface she'd touched, erasing traces of their struggle. But her body, what could he do? His throat tightened as he gazed at her, wrapped in the blanket. The ocean roared below, its depths tempting. If he cast her into the waves, they might swallow her. But the risk was too high. A body washing ashore would spark an investigation. Instead, he devised a plan. The resort had a hidden service yard where trash was collected at night. If he could move her there, he might stage it as an attack elsewhere. Donning a hoodie, Ethan lifted Sophia's body, his muscles straining. The corridors were empty, but every sound, a distant door, a creaking pipe, sent his heart racing. If anyone saw him, it was over. Step by step, he carried her to the service yard, the night his only shield. By dawn, the resort glowed with golden light, the air fragrant with salt and flowers. But Ethan's mind was a maelstrom. He had erased the evidence, but fear gnawed at him. Every glance from staff felt like suspicion, every noise like footsteps closing in. When a maid knocked, mid-morning, Ethan froze. The "Do Not Disturb" sign hung on the door, but the knocks persisted. He opened the door, forcing a weary smile. "Room cleaning, sir?" she asked. "No, thank you," he said, his voice tight. "My wife and I are resting." The lie burned his tongue. He needed to escape before questions arose. Ethan packed their bags, leaving Sophia's behind to maintain the ruse. At the front desk, he checked out alone, claiming his wife was on a morning stroll. The clerk nodded, unaware. With a practiced smile, Ethan left the resort, his hands slick with sweat. But as he stepped outside, his heart stopped. Police cars lined the entrance, their lights flashing. Staff whispered nearby, one pointing his way. Had they found her? Had he been seen? An officer approached. "Sir, we need to speak with you," he said, his tone calm but firm. Ethan's world collapsed. The dream honeymoon was over, and so was his freedom. Sophia's honeymoon was meant to herald a new beginning, a testament to love's triumph. Instead, it became her tragic end, a love destroyed by fear, deception, and murder. Ethan thought he could outrun his crime, but the truth was inescapable. What drives a man to betray his vows? Was it prejudice, fear, or a darkness within? The answers linger, as fleeting as the waves that crash against the shore, carrying away the echoes of a love lost forever.